Cameron, Lena, Clara, Emmett, and Nora, 5 ordinary people, each living separate lives, yet unknowingly connected by one terrifying secret. When a single criminal's dark actions threaten to destroy them all, their courage and sharp instincts become the only hope to uncover the truth. This is the story of how 5 innocent people stood up against one ruthless predator. Cameron Blake was a nature photographer who had spent most of his adult life capturing the quiet beauty of forests, rivers, and mountain skies. On a cold October morning, he set out early to Blackwood Forest, hoping to photograph the golden mist rising through the trees. As the sun began to light up the horizon, Cameron adjusted his lens and focused on the trail below. That's when he noticed something strange. A man was walking quickly through the trees, far from the usual hiking paths. He was dressed in dark clothes and wore a cap pulled low over his face. In his hand, he dragged a large suitcase that bounced awkwardly over the roots and rocks. Cameron paused, curious. It was unusual to see anyone in this part of the forest so early, especially someone moving so nervously. He zoomed in and took a few silent photos, careful not to make noise. The man glanced around, clearly checking if anyone was watching, then disappeared into a dense thicket. Cameron waited a few minutes, then cautiously approached the spot where the man had gone in. He didn't want to follow too closely, so he stayed at the edge, snapping a few more shots from a distance. The man was now out of sight, but the heavy suitcase left faint drag marks in the dirt. Later that afternoon, Cameron returned home and uploaded the photos. When he zoomed in on the suitcase, he noticed something disturbing: a dark red smear near the handle. It looked like dried blood. That same day, he heard a local news report about a 17-year-old girl named Rachel Keller who had gone missing the night before. She had last been seen at a gas station just a few miles from Blackwood Forest. Cameron's heart pounded. Could the two events be connected? He didn't want to take chances. Anonymously, he sent the photos and GPS coordinates to the local police, hoping it might help. But the next morning, officers searched the area and found nothing. The suitcase was gone, and the trail was cold. Cameron never mentioned his involvement to anyone. He told himself he had done what he could, but something about that man's expression, something hidden, calculating, stayed in his mind. He didn't know it then, but his photographs had just captured the first clue in a much darker story. Lena Moore had driven her taxi through the streets of Fairhollow for over 11 years. She knew the town better than most, every shortcut, alleyway, and dead end. On a rainy Thursday night, she was parked near the central library waiting for her next fare when a man suddenly knocked on her window. He was tall, pale, and seemed in a hurry. He held a large suitcase, which he struggled to lift into the trunk. What struck Lena immediately was how tense he looked. His face was slick with sweat, even though it was barely 12 degrees outside. His hands were shaking slightly as he typed an address into her dashboard GPS. He wanted to go to a rural road on the outskirts of town, near the old train yard where hardly anyone went anymore. Lena thought it odd, but didn't ask questions. She had seen her share of strange passengers. As she drove, she couldn't help but notice the strong chemical smell coming from the suitcase. It was a sharp, artificial scent, like cleaning fluid. She glanced at the rearview mirror. The man was staring straight ahead, saying nothing, eyes wide open, fingers tapping nervously on the seat. They reached the drop-off point, an isolated gravel path with no houses or streetlights. Lena hesitated as she stopped the car. The man got out quickly and dragged the suitcase behind him into the trees. He didn't ask for change or say thank you. He just disappeared into the dark. Feeling uneasy, Lena waited a few minutes before driving off. Something didn't sit right. She opened her logbook and noted the time, the man's appearance, and the drop-off location. The smell in the trunk lingered even after he was gone. The next day, a news story caught her attention. A burnt suitcase had been found near that same gravel path. Officials dismissed it as someone illegally dumping trash, but Lena knew better. She never told anyone what she suspected. People might laugh or worse, accuse her of making things up. Still, she saved her notes and quietly started keeping track of any other strange trips. Lena didn't know the man's name. She had only seen him once, but the ride she gave him would later become a key thread in a web of clues leading to something far more sinister than she could have imagined. Clara Bennett had lived in the small town of Fairhollow for most of her life. Since losing her husband a few years earlier, she found comfort in her quiet routine and the familiar surroundings of her modest home near the old sawmill. Most nights, she went to bed early, but on this particular evening, something kept her awake. Around midnight, she heard unusual sounds coming from the woods behind her house, soft rustling and faint flashes of light. Curious and a little uneasy, Clara stood by her window, peering into the darkness. The forest was dense, but she could make out a figure moving slowly among the trees. It was a man, digging into the earth with his bare hands, his movements hurried yet careful. The flashlights he used flickered on and off, casting eerie shadows across the trunks. Clara couldn't see his face clearly, but she sensed something was wrong. She didn't call the police right away. Instead, she reached for her notepad and began jotting down details: the date, time, and the direction the man was digging. She knew she might need to remember these if anything happened later. Days passed without incident, but Clara's curiosity didn't fade. One afternoon, her dog returned home carrying something muddy in his mouth. Clara pulled it from him and discovered a worn glove, soaked with dirt and tangled with grass. Inside the glove, she found a small bracelet, a simple silver chain with delicate initials engraved on it, R.K. Clara wrapped the bracelet carefully in a cloth and placed it in a box she kept in her closet. She wondered whose it was and whether it had any connection to the man she had seen digging. The police never followed up on her report, and no one else seemed to take notice of the strange activity in the woods. But Clara didn't forget. She began visiting the edge of the forest during daylight, hoping to spot something that might explain what she had seen. The bracelet stayed with her, a silent reminder that sometimes small details hide bigger secrets. Unbeknownst to Clara, her quiet observations and that simple piece of jewelry were threads woven into a much larger story, one that would slowly unravel the dark truth lurking beneath the surface of their peaceful town. Emmett Cross had worked as the night janitor at Blackwood High School for nearly 15 years. His routine was simple: sweep floors, empty trash bins, clean classrooms, and lock up before dawn. Emmett liked the quiet hours when the school was empty. It gave him time to think without distractions. But one night, something out of the ordinary caught his attention. It was just past midnight when Emmett was mopping the hallway on the third floor. As he approached the old storage room at the end of the corridor, a room that hadn't been used for years, he noticed the door was slightly ajar. This was unusual because the school's cleaning schedule required all doors to be securely closed. He stopped and stared for a moment, feeling a chill run down his spine. Emmett pushed the door open cautiously. Inside, the room was dark, but he could make out several objects scattered across the floor: coils of rope, large sheets of clear plastic, and several empty bottles of industrial-strength cleaner. The plastic sheeting looked fresh, as if it had been recently unfolded and crumpled back up. The ropes were thick and sturdy, far too heavy-duty for any typical school use. A wave of unease washed over Emmett. Why would anyone bring these items into a locked storage room at school? His mind raced through possibilities, none of which made sense. He quickly snapped a few photos on his phone as evidence and reported the discovery to the school principal the next morning. However, when Emmett returned later that day to show the principal, the room was spotless. All the suspicious items had vanished without a trace. The principal dismissed it as some kind of prank or misunderstanding, and no further investigation was made. Emmett's photos mysteriously disappeared from his phone as well. He wasn't sure if he had deleted them by mistake or if something else had happened. Despite the lack of support, Emmett felt certain something was wrong. He began to keep a detailed journal, writing down every strange occurrence, every unusual visitor he saw near the school, and every odd behavior he noticed among students and staff. He never shared his fears openly, but inside, he was convinced the school held secrets no one wanted uncovered. Little did Emmett know, his quiet vigilance was about to become a vital piece in unraveling a dark mystery, a mystery that connected him to the other four people unknowingly fighting the same hidden evil. Nora Fields had always been a meticulous librarian. Her days were spent surrounded by books, organizing shelves, and helping visitors find what they needed. The library was her sanctuary, a place where order and quiet reigned. One morning, as she performed her usual task of checking the book return slot, she noticed something unusual. Among the returned books was an old, worn paperback with no barcode or library sticker. Curious, Nora pulled it out and flipped through the pages. Tucked inside the back cover was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Unfolding it carefully, she discovered a hand-drawn map of the nearby Blackwood forest. The map was marked with several red X's scattered across different parts of the woods, connected by strange symbols that Nora didn't recognize. At first, Nora thought it was some kind of scavenger hunt or a creative art project from a local school. But as she studied the map more closely, she began to feel uneasy. The locations marked with the X's matched areas mentioned in past missing persons reports and unexplained disappearances. Some of the symbols looked like warnings or clues, but their exact meaning was unclear. Nora brought the map to her supervisor, hoping for advice or support, but the librarian shrugged it off as a harmless prank or a piece of local folklore. The police, when shown the map, dismissed it as irrelevant. Frustrated but undeterred, Nora made several copies of the map and quietly shared them with a few trusted local journalists known for investigating unusual stories. One reporter took her seriously and began digging deeper. As news articles started to surface, Nora felt a mix of relief and fear. The map had given new direction to an investigation that had long stalled. It connected all the strange events and missing people to a chilling pattern. Though Nora had never met the other four, the photographer, the taxi driver, the widow, and the janitor, her discovery linked them all in a silent network of truth seekers. Without her sharp eye and determination, the trail might have gone cold forever. Her simple act of noticing an unmarked book and a hidden map had cracked open a dark secret, shining a light into the darkest corners of Blackwood Forest and into the heart of a criminal no one suspected.